want to start here with an analogy at the risk of embarrassing my kids again. I told them I was going to do this. They're like, Dad, please don't. But here we go. I think it's true that for all of us, we interpret life uniquely through our own perspectives. Like if you want to think about the analogy of glasses, we all have a pair of glasses that we look through to see life, interpret life, understand things. And thinking about just things we do as people, like to make this analogy make more sense, like if you're watching a movie, there are different glasses you might read or you might use to watch the movie that might give you a different perspective on what you're watching. So I've got a pair of glasses here. If you're gonna watch a movie for pure entertainment, you put those glasses on, right? You're gonna see a lot of fun stuff. You're gonna laugh. You're gonna be scared at the things that are scary. You're gonna walk away super excited. But if you decide, I'm not really there for pure entertainment, I'm gonna put on my glasses where I'm just paying attention to the musical score of this movie. Maybe it's like a John Williams movie or a Hans Zimmer movie. You're like, I just wanna listen to the music. You're gonna put those lenses on. You're gonna watch the movie that way. If you are a movie critic, maybe you write for Rotten Tomatoes, or like most of us, we're all wannabe movie critics. You put on the movie critic lens and you're gonna watch that movie through a specific lens that's gonna see like, hey, how is this movie made? Is it really doing what it's trying to do? How is the acting? What's the plot? Does it make sense? Is it legible? Is it really doing what it's supposed to be doing? The lens that you watch the movie through, whatever you choose to do that through, is gonna determine how you watch it, what you notice, and what you take away from it. Would you agree with that? We do it with movies, we do it with books, we do it with workplace, we do it with friendships, we do it with life. And sometimes we're taking glasses off and putting different glasses on knowingly, sometimes we're doing it unknowingly. I start that way because I want to ask us a question as we open up scripture and we think about this first book of the Bible, Genesis. What glasses am I wearing when I read Genesis? Now, I get this morning, there are some of you here that have never heard of Genesis. That's okay. You're gonna be able to read it for the first time this morning. Some of us are somewhat familiar, but not really. Many of us have read Genesis, and there are glasses that we wear when we open it, and we maybe are not aware of the way we're reading it. So some of the glasses we wear as modern people, as we pick up Genesis, we put on our modern science and history book lens, and we start to read Genesis for the evidence that's there to disprove scientific theories. We read it for exact dates and details like you would a history book on our country or something else in school that we learn about. But the problem with this is that Genesis wasn't written as a modern scientific book or a modern historical book. That doesn't mean it doesn't communicate truth. It communicates truth. Truth we need to know, and truth that does challenge scientific theories, but it doesn't do that scientifically. Like this is not the way that Genesis was written. It's sort of like, I just watched this recently with my kids, Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, there's Indy's comes up against this guy who has a sword who wants to get in a sword fight, and Indiana Jones pulls out a gun, right? Not a sword. Like the scripture doesn't pull out the same thing that science pulls out and fight with it. It comes with a completely different weapon. It's doing something more what you might call theological than scientific. So we might be wired to wear the science history book lens. It's not the way that Genesis was written. We might read it with the lens of being overly critical. That's definitely something of the last couple hundred years where we look at it through the critical lens of like, man, this book is really outdated. There's some inconsistencies I'm noticing, and so therefore it doesn't have anything to say to my life. Another lens we might read it through is like the overly moralistic lens where it's like, hey, this book exists for good and bad, so I can understand what I should do and what I shouldn't do. Above that, there's not really anything meaningful in this book. It's just like, hey, be like Abraham, don't be like Lot. Be like Joseph, don't be like Joseph's brothers. And that's like all we read Genesis for. Again, that's not what we're supposed to read Genesis like. So the question is, how should we read Genesis? Both this morning and over the next 12, 13 weeks, how should we read Genesis as individuals when we pick up the Bible on our own? I wanna give you two suggestions, two ways that we're gonna be reading it. Two ways of reading it that is open to any person, whether you're a biblical scholar or not. There are so many resources out here. Here's the first one. We should try to read Genesis like an ancient Hebrew, as much as we can. I caveat that because we're not ancient Hebrews. We're not living at the time that Genesis was written. And so while there is a lot of information available to us, it's still limited. But it gets us in the mindset of, instead of asking the questions, putting on the lens that makes sense to us in our modern times, like how were Hebrews hearing this? What was their understanding of the world? What cultural milieu were they living in at their time? What questions were they asking? And try to understand Genesis from that perspective. Here's the second one, and even more important one, is we should read Genesis like Christians. So while we want to understand the historical context, we also want to read it through the lens of Jesus. Because whether we want this or not, we come to the Bible always with the story of Genesis in a two testament book, Old Testament, New Testament. Genesis sits in the same binding as the book of the Gospels and Revelation and the books written by the apostles. And so we read those together. If you're a disciple of Jesus, you can't help but come to any book of the Bible, even the Old Testament, and read that through the eyes of Jesus, because Jesus has given us the scriptures from his hand. And so we have to read it as Christians. And we will try to do that week by week to understand, like a Hebrew would, the text, but also to read it through what is this saying through Jesus and about Jesus.